But to bend the fate of empires, let's uncover the hidden truths of how sex and political manipulation intertwined in the silent and seen corridors of power. Welcome to the world of Egypt's female pharaohs, where silence spoke louder than any battle. The world of ancient Egypt was one of monumental power, immense wealth, and divine rulership. But behind the grand temples, the towering pyramids, and the vibrant life along the Nile, there was another, quieter force at work, a force that shaped the destinies of the great Egyptian rulers. That force was sex, not in the crude or scandalous sense, but as a tool of power. For Egypt's female pharaohs, intimacy wasn't just personal, it was political. These women, like Cleopatra, Nefertiti, and Hatshepsut, were masters at using romantic relationships and strategic marriages to manipulate the politics of not just Egypt, but the entire ancient world. Their alliances were not just about affection, but about cementing political alliances, securing military power, and ensuring dynastic control. They knew that by intertwining their personal lives with those of the most powerful men of the age, they could manipulate the course of history without raising a single voice. The subtle use of sex as power. Let's consider Cleopatra, Egypt's last pharaoh. When most people think of her, they think of beauty, romance, and powerful lovers like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. But beneath the surface, these relationships were far more than just affairs of the heart. They were meticulously strategized moves on the political chessboard. By aligning herself with Caesar and later Antony, Cleopatra secured Egypt's place in the ever-expanding Roman world. Each of these relationships was a power move, ensuring Egypt's sovereignty in the face of the growing Roman Empire. But it wasn't just Cleopatra. Take Nefertiti, for example. She wielded power alongside her husband, Akhenaten, and was possibly the co-regent of Egypt during his reign. Nefertiti's image was not just that of a queen consort, it was the image of a woman with divine authority. She ruled not just by virtue of her marriage, but by her influence in the most sacred spaces of Egypt's temples and courts. It was likely that Nefertiti used her political connections through marriage and intimacy to carve out her place in Egypt's history. Even Hatshepsut, who reigned as pharaoh in her own right, manipulated perceptions of her gender and power. Though she was married to her half-brother Thutmose II, her rule was not defined by a typical patriarchal marriage. Instead, she claimed power and authority, often portrayed in her statues with the symbolic beard of Pharaoh, defying the typical gender roles of the time. She consolidated power through alliances and deft political maneuvering that involved much more than mere leadership. It involved the very essence of gender and sex used as a tool to maintain power. Why silence matters in power. The key to understanding these women is their ability to work in the background to silently maneuver their way to the top of Egypt's throne. Their power came not from the public battlefield, but from the quiet personal negotiations that took place in their private chambers and courtrooms. The silence of their actions allowed them to operate without drawing too much attention, keeping their strategic relationships hidden from the prying eyes of rivals. In ancient Egypt, a pharaoh was not just a political figure. He or she was also a divine intermediary, This means that the Pharaoh's power didn't only rely on earthly alliances. It also stemmed from the Pharaoh's divine status. Female pharaohs, like Cleopatra, knew how to use their divine connections and political relationships to maintain their reign and manipulate their political environment without openly declaring their authority. As we delve deeper into these relationships, we began to see that sex, love, and marriage were not just personal choices, they were calculated political decisions. Join us as we explore the hidden world of these powerful women and see how their silent use of intimacy shaped the history of one of the greatest empires the world has ever known. In the ancient world, where politics and personal relationships often intertwine, the sexual relationships of powerful women were often not just about love or attraction. For the female pharaohs of Egypt, relationships with foreign leaders were strategic alliances, each one designed to secure political power and maintain Egypt's sovereignty in a world dominated by powerful empires like Rome. These relationships were not public displays of affection, they were calculated, secretive, and often had the fate of Egypt resting on them. Let's delve deeper into the most powerful and politically charged relationships of the Egyptian female pharaohs. These alliances were not just affairs, they were moves on a political chessboard intended to ensure Egypt's survival and Egypt's dominance over foreign influence. Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, a political affair that changed the course of history. One of the most famous and politically impactful relationships in Egyptian history was the one between Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, wasn't just a beautiful queen. She was a skilled diplomat and strategist who understood that her nation's survival depended on alliances with the greatest powers of the time. As the Roman Republic began to extend its reach over the Mediterranean, Cleopatra recognized that she could not hold on to Egypt's independence without aligning herself with Rome's most powerful leader. The relationship between Cleopatra and Julius Caesar began in 48 BCE, when Caesar visited Alexandria during the Roman Civil War. In the chaos of her brother Ptolemy XIII's reign, Cleopatra saw an opportunity. With Egypt's throne threatened by rival factions, Cleopatra smuggled herself into Caesar's presence in a carpet, where she seduced him. This dramatic, yet politically charged moment led to a personal and political alliance that would change the course of history. Cleopatra's allure was more than just her beauty. It was her ability to strategize and use her relationship with Caesar to ensure Egypt's survival. Through this affair, she cemented an alliance with the most powerful men in the world. In exchange for Caesar's military support, Cleopatra regained her throne and secure Egypt's sovereignty under Roman influence. The two of them were not just lovers, they were partners in the battle for Egypt's independence. Cleopatra and Mark Antony, the final push for power. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, Cleopatra turned to Mark Antony, another Roman leader. Her relationship with Antony was equally politically charged, but it also showcased Cleopatra's ability to navigate Roman politics and use her personal life as a way to strengthen Egypt's position. Mark Antony, a member of the Second Triumvirate, formed an alliance with Cleopatra that would have far-reaching consequences. They met in 41 BCE, and within a short time the two were not just lovers but political, eventually lead to her downfall. In 31 BCE, their forces were decisively defeated at the Battle of Actium by Octavian's fleet, and Cleopatra's reign ended. Despite this, her relationship with Antony was a testament to her political acumen and her ability to use intimacy to shape Egypt's future. The political significance of sexual relationships in ancient Egypt. While Cleopatra's relationships with foreign rulers are perhaps the most famous, they were by no means unique. In fact, sexual relationships in ancient Egypt were often used as tools of political influence by many female rulers. These relationships were not just personal. They were part of a larger strategy to maintain power, secure alliances, and ensure the stability of Egypt's position on the world stage. The pharaohs, male and female alike, were believed to be divinely chosen rulers, and their relationships were seen as part of the divine order. Royal marriages were often more about securing dynastic succession and alliances than love or affection. The pharaoh's power rested on the ability to maintain control over the country and its resources, and this often meant using marriage or relationships to strengthen political ties. For female pharaohs like Hatshepsut, who ruled Egypt as a female king, relationships were also part of the complex political landscape. Hatshepsut was married to her half-brother, Thutmose II, but after his death, she ruled as regent for her stepson, Thutmose III, before eventually assuming the title of Pharaoh herself. Although Hatshepsut's reign is often depicted as one of stability and prosperity, her marriage and the political role she played were essential in maintaining Egypt's dominance in the ancient world. Nefertiti, influenced through beauty and power. Nefertiti, the wife of Akhenaten, was not only a queen but also a co-ruler of Egypt. Her power was not just derived from her marriage, but also from the political influence she wielded alongside her husband. Nefertiti is perhaps one of the most iconic queens in Egyptian history, not only for her striking beauty, but also for her active role in reform politics. Nefertiti's image was used extensively in art and religion to signify power, both politically and spiritually. Her beauty became a symbol of Egypt's grandeur, but it was also a powerful tool used to reinforce her legitimacy as a ruler. Nefertiti's reign, especially alongside Akhenaten, was marked by a religious revolution and the worship of the sun god Aten, but her ability to maintain political control despite the religious upheaval was rooted in her strategic alliances and her influence over the people. As we explore the lives of Egypt's most powerful women, we can see how their relationships, though often kept out of the public eye, were a driving force in their political strategies. These intimate bonds, whether used to form alliances or secure power, were an intrinsic part of the silent politics that kept Egypt's throne secure. Let us now move forward and explore how these women's political relationships were carried out behind the scenes, often hidden under the veil of their private lives, yet always impactful. As we continue to explore the world of Egypt's powerful female rulers, one thing becomes crystal clear: intimacy was a tool of political power. These women were not just queens or consorts. They were masters of manipulation, wielding their relationships as strategic weapons to protect Egypt's sovereignty and influence, sometimes even to shifting the fate of empires through sexual relationships and strategic alliances. The pharaohs used intimacy to control political movements, secure thrones, and ensure that their rule extended beyond just their earthly lifetimes. For Cleopatra, the story of her relationships isn't just one of seduction. It's a masterclass in how to wield sexuality and charm as a tool of survival and power. But Cleopatra was not alone. Nefertiti and Hatshepsut, two other notable female pharaohs, used their positions to control Egypt through both divine authority and strategic personal alliances. Let's delve into the powerful and calculated ways these pharaohs used their romantic and political relationships to secure dominance, not just within Egypt, but across the Mediterranean world. Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, a relationship built on power. Cleopatra's legendary relationship with Julius Caesar is often viewed through the lens of romantic entanglement. But it was much more than that. It was a political maneuver that preserved Egypt's sovereignty. At the time of their first meeting in 48 BCE, Egypt was embroiled in a civil war between Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy XIII. Cleopatra, already a smart and strategic ruler, knew that her throne and Egypt's independence was in jeopardy. To cement her position, she needed a powerful ally. When Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria, Cleopatra found the perfect opportunity to use her relationship with the most powerful man in Rome to ensure Egypt's place in the world. It is said that Cleopatra sought an audience with Caesar, and instead of simply presenting her case, she famously had herself smuggled into his palace in a carpet. This dramatic act wasn't just about love. It was about using her charm and charisma to capture Caesar's attention and align herself with Roman power. The bond between Caesar and Cleopatra was solidified quickly, with Caesar supporting her in her struggle against her brother. More importantly, the relationship granted Cleopatra military backing, which helped her retain the throne of Egypt. After Caesar's victory, Cleopatra was able to secure her position and influence, and together they had a son, Caesarion, whose legitimacy solidified Cleopatra's power further. Caesar and Cleopatra's relationship was far from simple affection. It was a political alliance, one that tied Egypt's fate to Rome's. In Caesar, Cleopatra found not only a lover, but a political partner who could help her secure Egypt's future. Through this relationship, Cleopatra cleverly ensured that Egypt remained a dominant power in the Mediterranean world, at least for a time. Cleopatra and Mark Antony, the final gamble for Egypt's future. After Caesar's assassination, Cleopatra turned her attention to Mark Antony, another powerful Roman general and a member of the Second Triumvirate. Antony was a seasoned soldier, and his alliance with Cleopatra was not just a romance. It was another political strategy to maintain Egypt's strength against the growing Roman dominance. Their relationship was marked by strategic moves, not just personal attachment. Cleopatra and Antony were both power players, and their union symbolized a joint campaign to preserve Egypt's influence. They met in 41 BCE, and in the course of their relationship, they not only formed a romantic bond, but also a military and political one. Antony, a key Roman figure, needed Cleopatra's wealth and resources for his military campaigns, while Cleopatra gained the backing of Antony's armies in return. Their relationship went beyond the personal, involving military alliances and territorial expansion. Together they plotted to create a new empire, one that would rival Rome. Cleopatra gave birth to twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, solidifying their union and the future of Egypt's royal line. However, like Cleopatra's previous relationship with Caesar, this one too was a calculated risk. Their campaign to challenge Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, ended in failure. After their defeat at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, both Cleopatra and Antony committed suicide, ending Egypt's reign as an independent power. Yet, Cleopatra's relationship with Antony shows just how far she was willing to go to preserve her nation's sovereignty, even if it meant aligning herself with the enemy of Rome. The role of sex in securing dynastic power. While Cleopatra's relationships with Roman rulers were the most famous, the role of sexual relationships in securing Egypt's dynastic future wasn't limited to her alone. Nefertiti and Hatshepsut also played key roles in using their intimate alliances to wield power and manipulate political landscapes. Nefertiti, married to Akhenaten, was not merely a queen consort. She was a co-ruler, helping her husband shape the religious and political landscape of Egypt. Nefertiti's status as a female ruler was almost divine. She played an active role in the worship of the sun god Aten and might have even ruled as Pharaoh after Akhenaten's death. Nefertiti's relationships, both with her husband and her royal lineage, helped her maintain political control during a tumultuous period. Meanwhile, Hatshepsut used her own marriage to Thutmose II to consolidate her position. But after his death, she took the unprecedented step of declaring herself pharaoh. Hatshepsut is one of the few female rulers in history to have completely stepped into the shoes of a king, wearing the royal beard and employing masculine symbols to solidify her reign. Her political alliances, particularly through marriage, helped her secure her position against rivals. Though she had no formal relations outside of her marriage, her bold declaration of kingship and use of her feminine wiles through propaganda and representation were key to her success. The use of sexuality to maintain power in the royal court beyond external alliances. Egyptian women of power also use sexuality and relationships within their royal courts to manipulate and maintain control. It wasn't just about relationships with foreign men. Court intrigues, marriages within the family, and alliances with powerful noblemen all played key roles in maintaining Egypt's internal stability. The pharaohs knew that by controlling the intimate lives of their courtiers and family members, they could ensure the security of their reign. For female pharaohs, marriage was often a way to forge political alliances with important nobles or influential men. These marriages were more than just partnerships. They were key to ensuring that power remained within the family. The pharaoh's sexual and marital choices were often directly tied to Egypt's political future, ensuring that only the most loyal subjects had access to the throne. As we have seen, the power dynamics at play in the relationships of Egypt's female pharaohs were far more intricate than simple love affairs. Cleopatra, Nefertiti, and Hatshepsut used intimacy and strategic alliances to navigate the political turmoil of their times, and their relationships with foreign leaders and court officials play critical roles in shaping Egypt's fate. In the next part, we will explore the symbolism of power and how Egypt's female rulers manipulated their public image, further cementing their status as divine rulers. As we move forward in exploring the hidden and often secretive relationships of Egypt's female pharaohs, it's important to recognize the way these rulers manipulated public imagery to reinforce their authority. They didn't just rely on their personal connections and romantic alliances. They strategically crafted their public personas and tied their identities to divine and political symbols. This manipulation of image, whether through art, religion, or public ceremonies, allowed them to maintain power and often position themselves as godlike figures with divine rights to rule. In the ancient world, image was everything, and the pharaohs of Egypt understood this more than anyone else. Every aspect of their appearance, from their regal attire to their portrayal in art, served to enhance their status as not just rulers, but as representatives of the gods on earth. For Egypt's female rulers, these symbolic representations were more than just physical displays. They were tactical moves designed to bolster their authority and preserve their legacy for eternity. In this section, we will explore how Egypt's most famous female pharaohs use sexuality, romantic alliances, and divine imagery to craft powerful public images, making sure their reigns would not only endure during their lifetimes, but also for the generations to come. The divine symbolism of Cleopatra. Cleopatra is perhaps the most famous female pharaoh, and much of her political savvy and authority came from her ability to use her image to project both romantic allure and divine legitimacy. Cleopatra was not just a political figure. She was the living embodiment of Egyptian goddess Isis, the goddess of magic, fertility, and motherhood, and Hathor, the goddess of love, music, and joy. One of Cleopatra's most iconic tactics was her public portrayal. Cleopatra wasn't simply a ruler, she was a divine figure. Through her relationships with powerful Roman men like Julius, Caesar, and Mark Antony, she used their allegiance to position herself as a goddess-like ruler. The alliances with these men reinforced her image as the ultimate authority of Egypt, someone capable of swaying the most powerful empire of the time. In art, Cleopatra was often depicted wearing the crown of Upper Egypt, with her face shown alongside divine symbols like the cobra, a symbol of Egypt's divine protection. These depictions created a dual image of Cleopatra as both queen and goddess, a perfect embodiment of the divine right to rule. Nefertiti, the power of beauty and iconography. Another female pharaoh who utilized divine symbolism to reinforce her power was Nefertiti, the wife of Akhenaten. Nefertiti's iconic bust, which has become one of the most famous representations of beauty and power in the ancient world, is a perfect example of how the pharaohs used their physical beauty to symbolize their divine authority. Nefertiti and her husband, Akhenaten, were responsible for a religious evolution that focused on the worship of Aten, the sun god. The couple presented themselves not just as rulers, but as the living representatives of the god Aten. Nefertiti's role in this religious transformation was key to her political influence. Though Akhenaten often overshadowed her in the records, Nefertiti's strength was apparent in the way she used her beauty and the godlike imagery of the sun to cement her place in Egypt's history. In public art, Nefertiti's face was often depicted as radiantly symmetrical, emphasizing her connection to the gods. Her beauty wasn't just a matter of aesthetics, it was a political tool, making her a symbol of divine power. It allowed her to maintain influence in a male-dominated world, where beauty and divine favor were seen as essential for power. Hatshepsut, gender and power through symbolism. Hatshepsut, one of the most successful female pharaohs, defied traditional gender roles by presenting herself not as a queen consort, but as a pharaoh in her own right. To maintain her power and authority, she used gender fluidity in her public persona, often depicting herself as a male ruler. Hatshepsut's most striking and symbolic choice was to portray herself wearing the pharaoh's ceremonial beard and the traditional male crown. These public representations allowed her to position herself as not only the regent for her stepson, Thutmose III, but as an autonomous ruler of Egypt. She went even further by commissioning grand monuments and statues, most notably her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, which emphasized her divine status. The imagery in her temple depicted her in a male guise, further solidifying her divine right to rule, even though she was a woman. Hatshepsut's ability to manipulate gender symbolism made her untouchable in her time, and her reign was marked by prosperity, trade, and stability. Sexuality as a form of power. Marriages and alliances. In ancient Egypt, the marriage bed was not just a private affair, it was a political tool. The pharaoh's marriage could have a profound impact on the power structure of the kingdom. It wasn't just about the personal bond between the pharaoh and their spouse. These relationships were used to secure alliances, maintain dynastic succession, and enhance Egypt's influence over other kingdoms. Cleopatra, for example, didn't just use her sexual allure to maintain power over Caesar and Antony, she used it to entrench herself as the rightful ruler of Egypt. Each relationship she entered into was carefully calculated to expand her influence, ensuring her kingdom's place in a world increasingly dominated by Rome. Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar, in particular, wasn't just about love. It was about creating an alliance that would ensure her kingdom's survival in the face of Roman expansion. The symbolic power of the female pharaoh's image. In ancient Egypt, the image of the pharaoh was sacred. It wasn't just about leadership, it was about divinity. Pharaohs were seen as living gods on earth, and their images were created to reflect their connection to the divine. This was especially true for female pharaohs, who often had to struggle against societal expectations of female leadership. By controlling their public image, they could command both respect and authority, whether it was through their portrayal in statues or their depiction in art. Female pharaohs used visual symbols to reflect their divine right to rule. Cleopatra used her image to project her influence in the Roman world, while Hatshepsut and Nefertiti utilized their art to position themselves as divinely chosen rulers, worthy of respect. As we continue to explore the ways in which female pharaohs used their intimate relationships as a tool of power, we begin to understand that these rulers were not only strategic in their personal affairs, but also in the cultural symbols they created. The power of the pharaohs was not just held in their armies or wealth, it was also constructed in the images, the monuments, and the messages they conveyed to their people. Let's move forward to see how these female pharaohs created lasting legacies through their image, their sexuality, and their strategic alliances. As we conclude this exploration into the lives of Egypt's most powerful female pharaohs, we begin to understand the intricate ways in which these rulers wielded not just their political authority, but also their sexuality and intimate relationships as tools of power. From Cleopatra's alliances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, to Nefertiti's strategic partnership with her husband Akhenaten, and Hatshepsut's bold move to declare herself pharaoh, the personal lives of these women were inextricably tied to their political machinations. Their use of sexuality wasn't merely about personal desire, it was a tactical tool to ensure Egypt's sovereignty and maintain power in an ever-changing world. These female pharaohs knew that to rule effectively they had to navigate a world dominated by men, and they used romantic relationships as one of their most effective weapons. What stands out about their reigns is their ability to blend personal relationships with their political agendas. While their affairs were often used to secure Egypt's place in the world, they were also strategic alliances that ensured their continued dominance. Their ability to manage these relationships and control their image demonstrates a remarkable understanding of the dynamics of power, where intimacy, alliances, and public perception intersect. Lessons to be learned. The stories of these powerful women offer important lessons for us today. The intersection of personal and political power. One of the key lessons from these pharaohs is how personal relationships can be used as a tool for political power. Just as Cleopatra used her relationships with powerful men to preserve Egypt's sovereignty, we can learn how our own personal networks and alliances can shape our outcomes in life, work, and beyond. Strategic use of influence. The way Cleopatra, Nefertiti, and Hatshepsut used their influence to shape history teaches us about the power of subtlety and the importance of strategic thinking. Sometimes, true power lies in the quiet manipulation of those around us, not in loud proclamations. Navigating gender norms. These women also teach us how to navigate gender norms in a world that often sees power as something exclusive to men. Hatshepsut, in particular, broke from traditional gender roles and adopted a masculine persona to assert her sovereignty. This highlights how strength can be expressed in different forms, and how we can adapt and reshape norms to empower ourselves. Legacy through influence. Cleopatra, Nefertiti, and Hatshepsut didn't just leave behind material wealth, they left a legacy of influence. Through their strategic use of relationships and symbolism, they were able to leave an indelible mark on history. Their ability to control their narratives and craft their legacies is a reminder that what we leave behind is not just measured in what we accumulate, but in how we shape the world around us. Sexuality is power. It is important to understand that these women were not victims of their relationships, but active agents who used their sexuality as a means of empowerment. They controlled the narrative of their personal lives, using intimacy and romantic alliances to strengthen their political positions. In the modern world, this lesson can be applied in how we use our influence in relationships to further our personal and professional goals. The power of image. Just as these female pharaohs used symbols, art, and public portrayals to reinforce their power, we can learn the importance of curating our image and using it strategically. How we are perceived by others can have a significant impact on our success and ability to influence the world around us. As we reflect on the strategies and lives of Egypt's most iconic female pharaohs, we are reminded that power, in all its forms, is about more than just physical strength or wealth. It's about understanding the tools at your disposal: relationships, influence, image, and perception, and using them to shape your future. Just as Cleopatra, Nefertiti, and Hatshepsut did, we too can navigate our personal and professional worlds with strategic thinking, creativity, and self-awareness. Empowerment comes from knowing how to use what you have, whether it's your intellect, relationships, or public persona, to make your voice heard and your presence felt. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Egypt's powerful women and the ways they used their relationships to craft legacies of eternal power, don't forget to subscribe for more explorations into the history's quieter but deeply impactful moments. Let's continue learning about how history, power, and intimacy have shaped the world we live in today.